Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. Later in the show, we will take a closer look at the 988 Suicide and Mental Health Hotline in the state of Florida and whether enough is being done by the state to make that system work. And we will also hear from a Republican state senator who is sponsoring this year's Condo bill that promises greater accountability for condo boards and associations. But we begin with Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz and the growing threat of anti-Semitism that took center stage this week during hearings on Capitol Hill.
Let's start with the broader picture. How serious an issue is it, and what can be really done about it?
No, it's a serious issue, Jim. When we're seeing people in the street holding signs say "Gas the Jews, kill the Jews" during ceasefire rallies. Ceasefire is a foreign policy. I may disagree with it, but it's a foreign policy. The gassing of the Jews and the killing of Jews is not a foreign policy unless it's a foreign policy of the Germans of the early 40s. And so, we're seeing that in this country. We're seeing people just be silent when they see that happening. We see people ripping down posters of Jewish hostages saying, "Oh, these people are not real," almost like a mental health illness. They're like clawing at these things while they're being filmed, and their lives are probably going to be ruined. And in the crescendo moment, if you want to know where we stand in anti-Semitism today in this country, you only have to look at the university presidents testify. These are Ivy League university presidents. Elise Stefanik asked a softball question. It was not a trick question. Is the killing of Jews, calling for the genocide of Jews, is that harassment? Does it violate the code of conduct? And their answer wasn't, well, of course. Their answer was, well, it depends on the context. Well, what is the context, Jim? The context of how we kill the Jews? Another answer was, well, it depends if it moves into conduct. Oh, so we have to wait for the killing for that to be harassment? It was such a failure, but it shows you right now, unfortunately, where our top universities are when dealing with Jewish students. There is no doubt in my mind, and there should be no doubt in your viewers' mind, that if this was happening to LGBTQ students, if this was happening to Hispanic students, if this was happening to Black students, that answer would have been, yes, that's harassment. You cannot go around the campus and say you want to kill Black students. If the KKK was marching on campus saying we want to kill Black students, right, that would clearly be a code of conduct violation. Those students would probably be gone. The president of Harvard also, when she was asked a question, would she want a neo-Nazi student at her university? She said, well, that obviously doesn't comport with Harvard's values, but we have a wide berth of thought here. Really? Oh, I didn't realize that the wide range of conversation should include Nazis.
Do you think, let me jump in. Do you think those university presidents should resign?
They should resign or be fired. I don't care whichever way they go. They cannot stay. They set a terrible example for their students. They were supposed to come to Congress and make it better. They were supposed to come to Congress and say, listen, this is a problem on campus. We were slow to respond. We're working on it now. But instead, they made it worse. They made Jewish students, made them more uncomfortable than they already are on campus. They failed. If there was a course on how to be a university president, if there was a course on how to testify in front of Congress, they both failed. Their students, when they fail an exam, don't get to just, do a do-over, right? You fail. They failed. They should no longer be there. But back to your question about it being a bipartisan issue, Jim. As you know, bipartisanship, right, is falling by the wayside here in Washington, D.C., except when it comes to being an anti-Semite. The Republican Party has neo-Nazis that, do marches. We've seen them in the state of Florida. And we see Republicans really quiet about that because it's their voters. And then on the left, right, my friends that are, for rights for everybody, for all sorts of things, right, never see a cause that they don't want to get involved in. And yet during these ceasefire rallies, they see people advocating for the killing of Jews, crickets, silence. And so anti-Semitism is a problem in both parties. It's very easy for Democrats to call out Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it's very easy for Republicans to call out the squad, but it's much harder to do it and call out your own party. And I just think that when we're talking about anti-Semitism, this is not a team sport. I'm taking off my blue jersey. If it's within my party, I'm going to call it out.
Why do you think we're seeing such a rise of it right now?
I think it's always been there, Jim. Right? I mean, it's not like people are just learning about the hatred of Jews. Like this is a new thing. This has been going on for a long period of time, and we have different inflection points of when it happens. But I think social media has really amplified this, because hate is pervasive everywhere on social media. I don't care what platform you're on, but obviously, look, on TikTok, which the algorithms, can be manipulated by China and Russia, and you can create echo chambers. They're feeding these kids misinformation, wrong pictures, wrong information, all sorts of different stuff, and they're hyping it up. You actually heard at the Republican debate last night that actually watching TikTok makes you 17% more anti-Semitic, according to a study. So social media has a huge impact on why we're seeing these kids go out in the street and chant for stuff that they don't even understand, quite frankly.
Let me broaden it out now to talk about the Israeli aid package, which is also now tied. President Biden wants to tie it to Ukraine aid, to aid for Taiwan, as well as border security. And that seems to be going nowhere right now as talks with regard to border security funding have fallen flat and Republicans have rejected what Democrats have proposed. What's the answer here? Where do you see this going right now?
Well, look, I think the answer is having a larger package on border security with the Ukraine funding, the Israel aid, and the humanitarian aid that we also need in Gaza. I think you're going to have to put it all together, and you're going to have to make it one big package. And I think Democrats are going to need to do more on the border. I think President Biden said that he's willing to do more. I think the American people want to see that. As we're helping our allies around the world, we also need to help ourselves. But I think what the Republicans are asking for right now is just way too much. We're not building a wall. They're still litigating things of 3 or 4 years ago that have proven not to work. But there's all sorts of policies that can be changed. There's all sorts of technology that can be used, and increasing border agents at the border. I'm for all of those things. But look, Speaker Johnson got us into this mess. He could have had a clean bill on Israel, totally clean, right after October 7th, in the first week of him becoming speaker. And instead, what he did is he decided to tie that to the IRS, try to save Americans money. It actually didn't. It wasn't budget neutral. It actually was going to cost us money the way he did it. He was told that bill was dead in the Senate. So rather than bringing Democrats and Republicans together on the Capitol steps, he decided to divide us, and he killed Israel aid. That bill could have been law over a month ago. And so now Israel's getting swept up in the Ukraine border argument.
Do you see likely that they might propose a clean Israeli bill and just take that out? And would you support that and leave Ukraine funding in doubt?
Well, look, right now, this is a place of incrementalism, Jim. We don't do really big things here. And when we do, it's very limited. So quite frankly, if we have to have separate votes on it, I'll do separate votes. If we can do it all in one package, let's do it all in one package. However we get there, we have to get there, because right now our allies are watching, right? Congress fail. Our enemies are laughing as Congress fails. It looks like the only thing the 118th Congress can do is expel a member and remove a speaker. Doesn't look that we can actually help our friends and help defeat our enemies. So it's vitally important that we get this done, whether it's before Christmas or after Christmas.
Speaking of House leadership, we know that Speaker McCarthy, former Speaker McCarthy, has announced that he's retiring, that he's leaving the House, as is Patrick McHenry, who was the interim speaker for a short period of time. What does that tell you?
Well, look, I never thought Speaker McCarthy was going to stay after, he was removed as speaker by his own members. I thought that, he served as speaker and that would probably be the end. And it was just a matter of timing. But watching him and McHenry go in the same week, and other retirements, if you look at who's retiring over the last couple of weeks, you're seeing people who are mostly reasonable and rational and try to get deals together leave. And they're going to be replaced by more chaos. Donald Trump is in full control of the Republican Party. If you want to know, if you think to yourself, that when maybe Donald Trump is done, the party will turn back. No, it is systemic. The Republicans in the House don't want to govern, right? They don't want to do anything. All they want to do is destroy stuff. They don't want to build stuff. The Freedom Caucus, which is the most extreme caucus, they're growing, they're full in control, and watching these moderate, reasonable members that I am happy to work with and have sponsored bills with. And I'm a bipartisan guy. You're talking to a Democrat who worked for a Republican. Watching these folks go, it's the continued breaking of the House of Representatives.
A Democrat who used to work for a Republican, that Republican being Ron DeSantis, how do you think he's doing so far in this presidential campaign of his?
Well, look, it doesn't matter how Ron is doing or Nikki is doing or Vivek is doing, because at the end of the day, this is all about Donald Trump. It's all about Donald Trump. It's been about Donald Trump. The debate last night is the first presidential debate that I can remember. We had 4 people up there literally fighting for second place. And second place isn't going to be the vice president's spot. Okay. None of them are going to get picked. And so they won't even mention him. It's like Voldemort, like no one say his name, he who should not be named. It's the weirdest thing I think we've seen in politics in modern history, where we're having these debates and the person who's going to win, the person who's going to be the nominee is not only not there, but please don't say anything bad about him. Don't criticize him. So look, Ron is governor of Florida. He's going to come back to being governor of Florida. That's what it appears the race is headed.
When we come back, the new 988 helpline is an incredibly valuable resource for people dealing with mental illness in our community. But is it getting the support it needs? We'll take a closer look. Stay with us. Welcome back. We turn now to a CBS News Miami investigation into the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. In July 2022, the 988 system was unveiled across the country so that anyone thinking about suicide or having a mental health problem could call a simple 3-digit number for help. When you call that number, you are supposed to be routed to a call center in your community who can help you find the support in the local resources you need. It is an important tool in battling the mental health crisis in this country. But how well is that system working here in Florida? What we found out may surprise you.
All across our country, people are hurting and they need help. The good news is getting that help just got a lot easier.
That was Jessica Rosenworcel, the chair of the Federal Communications Commission, launching the 988 system on July 18, 2022.
Effective immediately, if you call or text 988, you will be connected to the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. There, professional support is available for anyone with a mental health emergency.
In a little more than a year, more than 7 million calls have been placed to 988. Ideally, those calls were answered by a local call center where the staff is aware of the services available in the community.
The vast majority of folks have their needs met by being heard, by having an interaction with a compassionate human being who cares. But let's face it, there is absolutely callers who have a valid and legitimate mental health concern.
Mike Martin oversees the 988 call center in Pensacola that handles calls from 10 counties across the Panhandle.
If you are not familiar with the local community mental health centers, the local health clinics, the local clergy, if you're not familiar with those resources, it's more difficult to make that handoff. So that's why it's really important that it be locally based.
But if the local call center is backed up or understaffed, the call is routed to a national call center, which will offer help, but may not know the best resources available locally.
There are more than 200 call centers across the country, and the local answer rate is 88%, according to Vibrant, the agency overseeing the 988 program nationally. But in Florida, the local answer rate between October 1st, 2022 and September 30th, 2023 was just 69%. The numbers have been improving every month from a low of 52% in October of 2022 to 74% in September. But even with those improved numbers in September, Florida's answer rate for that month was still 45th in the country.
I do think we got a slow start. I don't think the call centers got the funding they needed initially to ramp up, but I think we're getting there.
Gail Geis is the executive director of the Florida Mental Health Coalition, which has been advocating for increased support for 988 in Florida.
I think we'll hit 90% in the next year.
2 years ago, when the plans were being drawn up in Florida to roll out 988, the State Department of Children and Families conducted a study and determined 988 needed at least $25 million a year in funding to properly staff and train workers at the state's 13 local call centers. According to Geis, the call centers received less than half that amount.
We really want to be able to ramp up and have a robust system, and we want our call centers to be able to advertise and hire and train and be ready for a surge in calls.
Currently, most of the money comes from federal grants, but securing a stable source of funding from the state is critical, Geis and others said.
To maintain the capacity to handle increased call volume when we, the state of Florida and the nation go much more active in our advertisement for 988 is at least a 50% increase of where I'm at right now.
Stephen Sardellis, who supervises a 988 call center in North Florida that covers 8 counties, said that because he only has 17 paid staffers, he has to rely on volunteers to cover the phones 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I think our volunteer program is great to have. But with a utility like this that we want to be accessible and readily available to everybody, we really ought to have enough paid staff dedicated to making sure that can happen at the rate that it is expected to happen, which is answering at least 90% of our calls within the first 30 seconds. In
South Florida, the 2 local call centers are having their own struggles. The call center for Miami-Dade and Monroe counties has an answer rate, according to Vibrant, of 56% between October 1st, 2022 and September 30th, 2023. And the call center operated in Broward had an answer rate of just 43%, meaning a majority of the calls to the 988 center in Broward end up being answered by someone in another state. In a statement to CBS News Miami, the agency running Broward's system said they are seeing improvements in recent months. We have redirected non-988 staff and resources to support 988, but can't continue to do that indefinitely. We need additional resources both to maintain and to continue increasing the local answer rate.
We also reached out to Jewish Community Services, which operates the 988 system in Miami. They said they do not believe Vibrant's numbers are accurate and that their answer rate is much higher than the 56% shown in this story. Nevertheless, increasing funding for the 988 system is expected to be one of the issues the governor and the Florida legislature will consider in the upcoming legislative session. But by all indications, the number of calls to 988 are only expected to increase. We'll continue to follow what happens. Up next, we'll look at another hot issue in the upcoming legislative session: what to do with condo and homeowners associations. Stay with us. Welcome back. While I was on vacation last week, my colleague Elliot Rodriguez and his guests had an excellent discussion about abuses in homeowners associations. This is also a major issue with condo boards, especially in light of the Surfside building collapse and the new requirements by the state for condo owners to increase reserve funds to make necessary repairs. Recently, I had a chance to talk to State Senator Jennifer Bradley, who is sponsoring this year's reform bill.
Can you give us an idea of what you're hoping to achieve when it comes to condo reform this year?
Yeah, and a lot of the ideas that are in the bill that we're going to see are bills that have been filed in years past. Senator Pizzo has filed bills multiple years on this issue, but I think what we're seeing now that's different is we passed the Surfside legislation, we passed the milestones, we passed requirements on what condos must reserve to be in good financial health to make sure that their buildings are safe. But we cannot leave condo owners without the tools they need to navigate their associations and deal with their associations while they go through this process. So this bill is going to give law enforcement an avenue to step in when there's what I believe would be criminal conduct occurring in the associations. And that clear avenue isn't there yet. And that is with regard to elections, election fraud, just willfully and repeatedly denying access to records, conflicts of interest with our community, with our managers who would give contracts to relatives or companies that they have a financial stake in. So you'll see an increase in criminal penalties. We've got requirements to update the websites with regard to the access to public records. have associations put all of their information up on a website so people don't have to continually go to the board and ask for these documents. DBPR needs to audit those websites and make sure that they're complete. Education, there's no requirement now for association board members to have any education. They can just sign off that they've read the bylaws and the declaration. That's insufficient. We need to make sure that every board member has the education and the knowledge they need to be able to serve their association and understand what the Florida law is, understand Chapter 718, what their fiduciary responsibility is to their owners. And so there'll be a comprehensive reform to give. Oh, the other issue is associations really push back when owners bring issues to light that are critical of the association. We've seen associations sue their owners for defamation and retaliate. This bill puts a stop to that. It says you may not use association funds to sue an owner for defamation, and it requires that there can be no retaliation by the board, and gives the owner some teeth, gives DBPR some teeth to be able to run down some of these abuses that we've seen. The emails just keep coming, Jim. I get emails all the time from owners with associations who have gone rogue through the state, taken out large special assessments. The work is never completed. The board doesn't even hold meetings. They have a meeting once a year to pass the budget, but beyond that, owners have no ability to get answers from their board. So this really will be a comprehensive package, and I expect it to be filed in the next couple of weeks.
You mentioned reserves. That was a big issue right after Surfside, and a lot of condominium owners are now facing the prospect of huge assessments as a result of the legislative requirement to bring their reserves up to the level that is necessary to make needed repairs. Do you see any, is that an issue that's going to be tackled again in terms of maybe providing some relief or a longer lead time for condominium owners to be able to pay those assessments or be able to deal with the practicality that they may end up losing their condo because they can't afford it? Any inclination that you see in the legislature to work on that issue?
Two things. One, a lot of associations haven't completed their SERS yet because they're not due until the end of 24. So real data in terms of exactly what is that increase going to be, what is the impact of that SERS going to be on the reserves, we don't really have a lot of data on that. But a lot of associations are certainly, and as they should, not waiving their reserves anymore, making sure that they are starting to make sure that they have the reserves there to be able to take care of their buildings. We're exploring some financial ways that could lessen that burden for them for a few years, but we haven't really finalized that language yet. But it's certainly a concern for associations who have waived year after year. There will be an impact for them as they try to transition to better financial health. And we're certainly sensitive to that. Obviously, there's insurance increases on top of that as well. So we're very sensitive to that and trying to explore ways to support these owners.
We'll be right back after the break. Thanks for joining us. You can follow me on X @DeFede or email me at jdefede@cbs.com. We'll be back again next week. Thanks again for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.